Hello, welcome to this guide on how to play DungeonWorld. It's a role-playing game. It was published by Sage Latora and Adam Coble back in 2012, and this is my old copy, which is now a bit coffee stained and well thumbed. It's a classic role-playing game of the sort of dungeon crawl variety, but it has some different, more modern approaches to a couple of different rules, and simplifies a few things as well. It's at its heart driven by a kind of narrative fiction type of game, so ideal for a theatre of the mind kind of set of players. However, in this video guide, I'm going to switch between a set of my models over here, which I can just sort of point my finger into the action there, and I've got a party of 4, which I'm going to take through a kind of a mini adventure where I'm going to teach you some of the rules of DungeonWorld. Just wanted to say a thank you as well to the authors.
Welcome.
Sage and Adam for writing this great game, and before I dive into the action, I also wanted to mention that Adam had granted me permission to share these details. Here's a quick overview of some of the basics of DungeonWorld. And to start with, when you do any activities in the game, they're called moves, and those moves are based on rolling 2d6. So rather than your classic d20, you roll 2d6 to complete a move. However, the different classes in the game, ranging from your typical barbarians through to wizards, use different damage dice, which do use the different sizes of the classic polyhedral style dice. Additionally, the moves come with a standard set. I've got them readily printed out here. And these moves are available to all of the players, so even a wizard could do a hack and slash attack if they so wished. Everyone can defy danger, volley, which is firing or shooting, throwing, discern realities, which allows you to kind of discern what's going on around you, ranging from spotting hidden things through to finding out a bit more information about what's happening in the scene. Defending, which is just defending against any kind of incoming damage towards another person. Parley, which is your classic kind of negotiation style. Spout law, which is spouting information about something that your character might know that you yourself might not. So if you said, well, I know about the royal family in this city-state, you could then roll on spout law, and the dungeon master will help you with information based on the fact that your character may know that, as long as you describe what your character may know. And then aid or interfere allows you to aid another character or actually interfere with another one too. And additionally, I've got at the bottom printed out some Games Master moves here. So these GM moves are essentially things that they do in reaction to the player's activities. As a quick overview of hack and slash and how you'd resolve that dice roll plus your statistics, I'll just show you a very quick example of making a hack and slash roll. So on the bridge here we have our Barbarian with some kind of dragon hatchling ready to assault her. And let's just say she wants to hit it with her axe. Let's just run through how that would happen. So first of all, if I bring up the Barbarian statistics, here's Meryl, our Barbarian. And you can see she's got a reasonably good strength of +2, dex of +1, con of +1. That comes from the scores that are listed below. So her highest score is 16, which gives her that +2 to any activities that use strength. So if I show you the move, hack and slash, that she wants to do, so she's just about to swing her axe to try and crush that creature's skull, you simply roll your 2d6 and then add that strength modifier of +2 to it. There's no individual skill for this move. You just use your statistics bare strength modifier. So a +2 on that 7 takes it up to a 9. And if we just have a look at the details on this hack and slash here, on a 10+, you would deal your damage to the enemy and avoid their attack. And at your option, you may choose to do 1d6 damage, but expose yourself to the enemy attack. But I got a 9 with my 7 plus her strength bonus of +2 up here. And it tells me below here that on a 7 to 9, you deal your damage to the enemy, but the enemy makes an attack against you too. So essentially you've not fully succeeded. You know, this isn't a binary win-lose on this attack. It's more of a variable result. If you got that 10 plus, you would have done your damage with no negative outcome. But because I rolled between 7 and 9 with the strength bonus added, it means that I got a sort of partial success is probably the best way to describe it, with a consequence. So she would now do her damage. In this case, she would do a d10 damage to the creature. 7. And then it would do its creature damage back. Let's just say it was a d6. It's only done 1 damage back to Meryl, which would normally reduce her hit points, which are 23, down by 1. But because she has 1 armor, this creature, if it was doing a d6 damage, as I've just rolled, would have got no damage onto the Barbarian, but she would have done 7. There's some other things that the Barbarian does, in particular because she's got messy and forceful tags on her weapon, but we won't go into that detail at the moment. That was just a quick demonstration of how almost every move that you do, like this hack and slash, has a variable success to it. And a 10 plus of the roll plus your particular statistic modifier that you're using is always a success and the best possible outcome you can have, but the others end up with some consequences that the Games Master has to run through with the player. There is another result on that spectrum of success and failure that is the move roll in DungeonWorld, is that the result between 0 to 6. So with this one, as a roll of 4, if I was making that hack and slash move, I would have resulted in a number lower than the 7 to 9 sort of partial success range. Even with the +2 from my strength modifier, I've only resulted in 6. And this presents an opportunity to the Games Master to make some of his own moves.
I've not seen
So obviously
such
the most basic
bravery.
is that they can hit back, but some of the monsters and creatures in DungeonWorld have described moves of their own. So for example, a ghoul might have a bite off a hand or a limb or a finger or something. So you get to make those rather sort of crunchy, interesting, hard moves of the creature or the environment in response to the failure that the player's just made. So I needn't necessarily just make that failure of 0 to 6 there if I didn't succeed on my hack and slash. As a monster doing pure damage back, I could pick one of the monster moves, or I could do something else from the range of Games Master moves that there are.
Well done.
So yeah, that's a general quick overview of those moves, and we'll move on now to the next stage. So I'll give you an overview of the characters here before we dive into the actual game. See over here, oh, I've given him a nudge. That is Milax. He's my thief. If I can just fire him up. Oh. Milax doesn't have any armor. He's got a damage output of d8, and as I mentioned earlier on, the damage is determined by your class, so it doesn't matter if he's shooting with a bow or a sword, or hitting with sword, he's going to do a d8 damage. He's got 18 hit points, and very good dex. I've got a score of 16, which gives me a +2 dex, which is important as a thief, because as you can see further down, his various skills, trap expert, tricks of the trade for sort of unlocking picklocks, etc., backstab, they generally favour a good dex. So yeah, there's nothing to stop you making a character like a thief and coming up with a low dex, but maybe giving them amazing strength, so they were really good at hitting things with the sword. But generally speaking, when you make these character classes up, you want to sort of play to their strengths. And as these things play out with all role-playing games, if you've got a physical character, whether it's a fighter or a dexterous monk, you want those physical characteristics, strength, dex, and con, along the top there, to be higher, and obviously the lower ones you'd put into some of the other factors below. But again, why not break the mold a bit? You could certainly have a high charisma on a barbarian and give them a low strength. They just wouldn't be so good at fighting as you'd normally expect from a barbarian. So the next in line is the wizard, and this wizard is called Tigerloaf. Again, has no armor. Damage output for a wizard is just a d4, so that's for stabbing things or maybe throwing anything. That's the standard class damage that they output. That's different for the spells they have. So if we go down to the bottom of that list there, you can see that Magic Missile is normally dealing a 2d4 set of damage to one target. So even though their normal d4 damage output is for their stabbing and physical type of attacks, they do have more damage available as their spell lists grow. And obviously these are all level 1 characters, they're all starting at the bottom level. Otherwise I've obviously favoured intelligence for Tiger Loaf, with an intelligence modifier of +2 from putting that score of 16 in there. So next in the lineup, so Tiger Loaf, as I was saying, in the orange there, and yellow gown. And then we have the next model here, which is our fighter. Now, Astrid has 26 hits. So Astrid has the highest hits in the group with a high con of 16. I could have put that 16 score into strength to give a +2 for attacks, but I decided to give her some more ability to soak up the punches with 26 hit points based off that high score of 16 in Constitution. And I was just mentioned here actually that each character class has a bonus to their base hits, but the first thing you do is take their raw Constitution score, so in this case 16, and then you add 10 to that for fighters. Last but certainly not least in the lineup is Meryl the Barbarian. She's over the back here and is a model from Hassle-Free Miniatures in the UK. So I'll just fire up her statistics and we'll have a look what they look like. So basically she's got a good top row there with a +2 from a score of 16 in strength, which makes her very good at the hack and slash move, because that's what you gain for your bonus on the hack and slash. So you can see there, you add your strength to that move type, and she's got the highest bonus available across the group. So she's very good at that toe-to-toe hacking and slashing. Also, because she's muscle bound as a barbarian's feature, she has forceful and messy tags on her weapon, which means she can knock things back out of the way with the forceful if she so chooses, and also generally make a mess of things. So it's quite a threatening description can be attached to the kind of damage she does because she's messy with it. And Meryl can also draw in the focus of enemies by using the "What are you waiting for" cry, which draws in the enemies to attack her rather than her companions in the party. And although they, if they're getting hit by something else, they'll obviously change their target. But this gives you that kind of ability to snag in those enemies, and also she gets a plus on them if she's successful on that roll, so it's certainly worth doing at the start of a combat. So that cry out to charge in. And her damage output for Meryl is a d10, so again a nice high dice there for any damage she does with her great axe. And as I mentioned before, that's a class damage output, so it doesn't matter whether she picks a spear up, a hammer, an axe, whatever it happens to be in her arms, it's going to do a d10 damage. Welcome to the Dreadmore. This is not a full scenario or campaign. I'm just running this as a solo so I can describe how the various different moves work as the players make their way around a set of ruins. However, we have here one of the main antagonists for this environment, called Milanog, a greater dead, who's found himself within these Dreadmore ruins and has set up his camp for various nefarious reasons. And beside him is Trinia, who's actually a friend of the party's, a friend of Tiger Loaf's, and she's been held captive here by Milanog. So it's a bit of a rescue mission, and we'll see how that pans out. It's worth mentioning there is no initiative in the DungeonWorld game, and players simply determine that order in response to the fiction as described by the Games Master. So if I flip over, and you can see the group there ready to take their action. If they were responding to some kind of described threat against them and some danger, it's up to that party to say what order they go in. You don't need to describe in absolute detail what they're going to do before that turn starts, but it's worth getting a view from them so they could say, oh, well, generally speaking, the barbarian's going to charge in, but first of all, we'll take a shot from the thief because he's got a bow to soften up the enemy first. That kind of thing is determined by the players, so they make that choice. The party are initially greeted with this view as they enter into Darkmoor ruins. They can see before them an open area, a sort of courtyard, which is surrounded by parts of the old ruins. They can see a bridge across from one of the walkways to another here, and some steps lead down into the courtyard. So as a group they need to decide what to do. And preparing for the worst, it's Tigerloaf the wizard that talks first and decides that she'll make the thief, Milax, invisible. So she's going to attempt to cast her invisibility spell, which she's already memorized, ready for this event. So to cast a spell, Tigerloaf needs to take a move. So let's have a look at her statistics. And there's the cast spell option. I flip over to the table where I can see my roll on the dice. She's going to take the first action of the game, and I'm just literally pressing this counter so I can see how many moves I'm going to be making. So casting a spell, she's going to cast invisibility onto her companion Milax the Thief. She'll roll a dice. Okay, so I've got a 10. And then I add her intelligence, which is the modifier that's applied to all spellcasting, as we can read here on the wizard's details. And from a 7 to 9, the spell would be cast, but there would be some sort of drawback, like drawing unwelcome attention. But because I've rolled a 10 plus her intelligence modifier of 2, I've got a 12, so that's cleanly in the 10 plus zone. So the spell is successfully cast, and I do not forget the spell, so you can cast it again later. So that's an interesting little part of spellcasting in DungeonWorld, in that if you do succeed with a 10 plus roll, you can cast that spell again later on without taking any kind of rest in between. So that's great, that's a success, thumbs up. So by touching on the shoulder of Milax, Tigerloaf has made him invisible. Her spell goes off, a small chant, and he fizzles out of existence. That's when he decided he's going to march forward and take a look at the bridge. Now the thief have their own move called Trap Expert, and he's going to roll that, explaining to me, the GM, that he'll be exploring the area, looking for signs of weakness on the bridge, looking around at the flagstones, kneeling down in his invisible state, and just observing using that Trap Expert move. So flipping back to here, we'll roll that dice. And that's not looking good, but it is at least a 6. So when I add on the Dex modifier for Milax, his Dex is +2, that takes it up to an 8. So that's in the 7 to 9 area. Now this is where this Trap Expert ability, which you can see on the top row of this panel for the thief here, on a 7 to 9 it says I get a hold 1. Now what that means is that as a result of that move, the holds are actions you can take. So if you have 3, you can walk through the area and ask those questions. But if you've only got a hold 1, you can only ask one of these questions here. So essentially it's saying, is there a trap here? And if so, what activates it? That's what Milax is going to ask me as he approaches this bridge. And as a GM, I will say, the bridge looks very weak, and it looks like it's been designed to collapse when people walk on it. So despite being invisible, Milax will pass this information back with a whisper to the rest of the party. Don't use the bridge. Let's head back down those stairs and into the courtyard. So that's their next plan. They'll move down there. So Milax, still invisible, and signified by that orange cube which I've put on the table there, marches back down the flagstone stairs and out into the courtyard, heading out towards that water feature. He stops while still under some shelter from the walkways above to not make themselves more visible, signifying to the rest of the group to hold back. But it's at this point that Tigerloaf decides she wants to make another action, and she's going to do a move called Discern Realities. So in the spirit of the game, it's not typical for players to say they're going to do a particular move. The idea is that they would explain what they're doing. So if Tigerloaf then said, I'm going to be moving carefully, looking around as I go, and checking the ruins to see whether I spot anything different, any movement, anything that doesn't look natural within the ruins. She said something like that to me. That would allow her to trigger the Discern Realities move. So let's make the roll. Let's flip back. And this is the third action, or third move of the game. And that's a fantastic roll. So I've got a 10. And if we look down at the Discern Realities details just above me here, it says that on a 10 plus, she can ask me 3 questions from the list below. So she gets to whiz through that list and find out what ones she wants to ask me. So with that success on Discern Realities, Tiger Loaf's got those 3 questions she's going to ask me as the GM. So the first thing she'll say is, what happened here recently? Thinking on my feet fast, as a GM, I'm going to say, there's some muddy footprints around the water feature. One of them looks kind of narrow, small and feminine looking. The others look large and almost like a bony imprint in the clay-like mud around the water feature. And they're heading over in this direction towards the rest of the ruins. So it looks like there's been some kind of struggle with multiple footprints. As you can see, maybe her friend Trinia has come this way before. She's then asking, what's here is useful or valuable to me? And I'm going to point out that over the back here there's a series of ladders, and if I can just make that a little bit more visible, there's a ruin over this backside too with a ladder leading up. So that's going to get them up to the next level of this walkway without having to use the rickety old trapped bridge. And then for her final question, she's going to say, what should I be looking out for? So feeding in again to what I said in terms of my description of seeing those footprints, she thinks she's seen kind of skeletal prints in the clay-like mud. So she's going to be looking out for some kind of skeletons, although she may be, as a player, never seen the things before, but she thinks something undead is in this region. That's what she's getting off those footprints. So it's Astrid that now responds to the news that there's been some kind of activity in the footprints. She steps forward, the fighter, and says, I have dealt with these Nightwalkers before. I can tell you about them. Let me see the footprint. I may know some more information I can share. So that's where we make a spout law. Again, Astrid's done a good job of explaining what she's doing rather than just saying, I'm going to make a spout law move. She said that she knows something about them in her past, and she kind of needs permission now to be able to tell us that information. And you get that by using this spout law. Now, spout law, you add the intelligence modifier to, and really she wants that 10 plus so that she can get some interesting information to share. And that's just me clicking the tally again to show that this is the 4th move. So she's made a very good roll there. She's got a 9, and if we have a look at spout law, on a result of 7 to 9, GM will only tell you something interesting, and it's up to the player to make it useful. So let's have a look what we can share. Well, what she can do when she looks down at the footprint, she can say, that's definitely is a skeleton. She doesn't know much more information about them other than she thinks that's an animated skeleton that's walked through that area by the bony print. So that's the information she's going to get from that. So Milax is still invisible with his little red cube down there. Orange cube even, orange cube. And he's decided he's going to move out. So he says he's going to move out cautiously across the courtyard, looking around as he goes, checking for any signs of activity. Now they know there are some skeletons somewhere around. So he's going to look around while he does that. So he's going to have an opportunity to do a Defy Danger because he wants to do it very quietly, despite being invisible, which already makes him hard to see. But I'm going to give him a +2 on this roll because of the invisibility as he walks across that open area. So if I just move the model over, and it's worth mentioning at this point, of course, that there's no move distances in the game of DungeonWorld. He can move as far as I feel like he wants to in that period of time. And again, in terms of not having a round turn sequence as well, or initiative, Milax has just said, I'm going to move over there and look around, but also move cautiously. So in a way, that's a chain of a couple of events that he's done there. He's done a Defy Danger because he's saying he's trying to do it very quietly to be not seen. whilst also studying things. So that's 2 moves we've got to do a roll on here to see how that turns out for him. So flipping over, if I bring up the moves, here's the Defy Danger, and just make sure that the Thief's up on the screen too. So with the Defy Danger, we do the 2d6 roll, and we've got a 10. This is the 5th move that we've done so far in the game. And Defy Danger, it's going to do it very quietly and stealthily using dexterity. So with a +2 from dex, because he scores 16, we've got a total of 12. So that's an incredibly good roll. So at the moment doesn't trigger anything. No one spots him while he's invisible as well. And I said I'd give him a +2 because of the invisibility. So really that's an incredible total, including the extra +2 that I've given him for that move. So in addition to the Defy Danger, he said that he wanted to discern realities by looking around at the same time, see if he could spot any of those skeletons that they saw the footprints for. So let's roll that, and that's another move. So this time with Discern Realities you add wisdom, and unfortunately Milax, his wisdom is only 8, which is a -1. So that brings that down to a 6. So on a 6, unfortunately, it's a negative result for them because that's failed that roll. So on that 0 to 6 result failure, Milax gets to mark up an experience point. So you learn from your mistakes in DungeonWorld. There is experience awarded at the end of a session, but also there's experience for failure. So if you have a particularly bad night and you're rolling really badly, you're actually more likely to potentially gain a level as you mark up 1 experience point per result of 0 to 6. And also now, of course, as a GM, I've got that opportunity now to make a move of my own. So just as a reminder of those moves,
I've not seen such bravery.
I can now use a monster or dungeon, location, move, or reveal some unwelcome truth. So what I'm going to do here is, obviously I've got unlimited options. You know, all these different items here could actually present some other kind of event to them. But what I'm going to do is say that while he was studying and didn't quite see what he was looking up at the walkway, one of the skeletons has stepped out of the shadows behind him. Now, of course, he's invisible, so the skeleton hasn't seen him, and he hasn't seen the skeleton, so it's stepped up right behind him. So the rest of the party have seen it step out. It's quite visible coming out of the shadows, but Milax will be surprised by it. Even though he's invisible, he's looking the other way and hasn't noticed it stepping out. So if I flip back over, hide away the GM moves, I've just put the skeleton, it stepped out of the shadows of here. No one would have seen it before, and now we're basically into a potential combat. And the interesting thing here is, of course, we don't roll for initiative, so it's still down to the narrative and the player's interaction with me as a GM as to what they do. I've described the scene. From the shadows, this skeleton stiffly moves, appears behind where they thought Milax had headed off to, because of course he's invisible, and the rest of the party have now seen that and can respond to it. So as a GM now, I've explained what's going on. A skeleton has stepped out of the shadows. What are they going to do? Now, as a party, because we're not rolling for initiative now, it's down to them to decide how they approach the situation. Now, one other impetuous character within the group may just say, I'm going to charge in. But it's worth just asking around the party, around the table, who's going to do what first, in what order, just to get a view on what's going to happen before you sort of dive into the action. It doesn't mean they're going to be locked into what they decide to do. For example, the fighter could charge in, decide to attack, and our wizard, Tigerloaf, could say, well, I'm going to hang back and maybe fire a magic missile in. But it might well be that in terms of the actual sequence of play, that the fighter did run in and slay the beast in one strike, in which case, obviously, the wizard wouldn't then decide to use their magic missile. They may do some other kind of action as the chaos of events unfolds before. So it's Meryl that's stepping up to the plate, the Barbarian. After some brief discussion amongst themselves, the party decides she'll charge forward, and she does indeed. With a war cry, "I'll knock the block off that beast." She runs forward and engages. So Meryl explains, as she's charging forward as a Barbarian, she's going to do a move, which is the "what are you waiting for?" So she's calling out, trying to get the attention of that skeleton. Focus all your attempts on me and pull that damage inbound onto her. So let's see if she can roll that. What are you waiting for? So I add my con to this at a +1. So that's a very good roll. Got myself a 9, +1, 10. So that's a success. So that skeleton is going to treat her as the most obvious threat to be dealt with and ignore the companions. So she also takes 2 damage against them. So I'll just fire up that monster. So here's the little skeleton. So she's getting a +2 on that. So that "what are you waiting for" move was the 7th move of the game so far. And now the Barbarian explains that she leaps past that fountain, lurches into the air, and swings her big axe down upon the skull of the skeleton with as much force as she can. So let's roll that and see how the hack and slash works out. So it's a 5, +2 from the strength modifier, which brings it up to 7. So that's between the 7 and 9. So that's a hit. She will deal her damage, but the enemy's going to make an attack against her. So her damage is the D10, plus that +2 she's got from the "what are you waiting for" move she did previously. And that's 10 damage. And this was the 8th move of the match. So 10 damage plus the 2, 12. And we can see up here the skeleton has 7 hit points. So with only 1 armor, it would remove that 12 damage down to 11. That's still going to smash it into pieces. So this is where, with the messy and forceful tags, forceful would allow Meryl to knock back the skeleton to somewhere, but there's no need to knock it back anywhere because it's been smashed to smithereens. And the messy tag would allow her to describe some terrible fate, like the rib cage and the skull was smashed to pieces. Perhaps she hit it so hard the skull went down through the rib cage and then splintered apart. However, it's worth noting over here that the skeleton, as I think I mentioned very much earlier in the video, the monsters do get moves of their own. So act out what you did in life, snuff out the warmth of life, reconstruct from miscellaneous bones. So obviously the players wouldn't necessarily know all these moves. These things I'd normally keep secret from the players in a normal game. However, that last one's very interesting, reconstruct from miscellaneous bones. That potentially means this skeleton could come back. If I get another move as a GM soon, something goes wrong for the players, I could reconstruct that skeleton. But for now, it's smashed up and it's in pieces on the floor. So I can remove that one from play, or perhaps I could just leave it on its side. In fact, I've got an even better option. I should put a counter down there, just to remind me that we've got one dead beast there, and put it out of the way. I nearly forgot then that was actually on a result of 7 to 9 that Meryl smashed the skeleton to pieces. So the skeleton still gets its damage back. However, I'm going to reduce the d6 to half. So whatever I roll, I'm going to half because he was so soundly smashed to pieces by Meryl. Okay, so a 5 or 6 would be a 3. And we'll say that the skeleton, as it's in its death throes, as it's lurching down and smashed to pieces, it claws down over her arm as it falls down onto the ground. So it's going to do 3 damage rather than the 5 because I'm halving the result on the d6. And we've got 1 armor point, so that's 2 damage through onto Meryl, which I shall mark on Meryl's character card. So that's 2 reduced of her 23, so she's down to 21 hit points. But that's a nicely smashed to pieces skeleton in the process. So that little scene is still playing out, and the rest of the characters obviously have got some actions they can do, but they can't see any other things to assault at the moment. But let's see and take a look at the terrain layout again. So Meryl's shouts for attention have drawn in some unwelcome attention. Through the door, over at the top here, we've got a couple more skeletons coming through. So the door opens, and in response to the shouting, there's 2 more skeletons up here. Now, timing-wise, this can happen as Meryl charges across and smashes up the skeleton. So we'll still give Meryl that +2 damage, because these skeletons are just as drawn to her and pulled in by her shouting that they want to snuff out her life, essentially. So she's still the focus of attention, and that's the next scene I'm describing to them. They've seen another couple of skeletons have come in, and the group now have an option. What do you do? How do you respond to that? So I've allowed the party to now move up, and essentially they've still allowed Meryl the Barbarian to take the lead, and she's used the ladders around the side, and together they've all climbed up in sequence. Mylax is still invisible, so still got that little orange cube because it's being maintained by Tigerloaf, the wizard. And Meryl still has that plus on her damage against the skeletons. So as she's charged up there, or climbed up there carefully, walked along the walkway, she's now engaged with another set of these 2 skeletons. Now they saw the activity in her war cry as she came through, so that ability that she had as a barbarian, which is that "what are you waiting for," it still applies, because these skeletons saw their old companion smashed to pieces, and although they're rather cold-hearted automatons with no emotions, they are still affected because they were drawn in by that war cry, and so that means Meryl on her attacks here will get a +2 damage. So let's flip over now and let her do a hack and slash as she's come up here to engage. So let's keep it rolling. So Meryl describes on the walkway here, she's going to dive forward, swinging her axe to hopefully take the midriff out of the first skeleton and then smash through into the one below and behind it, so as to cause some damage against them both. So we'll let her do a hack and slash move. We'll switch back over to do the dice rolling. Bring up statistics. So straight away I know with a hack and slash it's the strength modifier that's applied, +2, and the hack and slash roll is the classic 2d10 again. So that's a great roll. There's also the 9th move. So that's a 10, and she adds +2, 12. So it's definitely a 10 plus. So that's going to do some damage. So I'll roll my d10 damage for the Barbarian, as detailed there. So that's a 6 plus 2, because of her ongoing war cry she's got against this group of skeletons, because they've been pulled in by her, which means we've got a total of 8 damage. Now if I bring that skeleton detail up again, we can see they have 7 hit points, but they do have 1 armor, so that 8th damage point's gone, but they receive 7 hit points each. So that's actually smashed the 2 of them to pieces, so that's 2 gone skeletons, and because she rolled a 10 plus, there's no negative effect. They're not going to get a chance to hit back. They are literally smashed apart. So she's welcome to describe what happens, which probably means she swings her axe in a way that they're splintered to pieces and smashed off the causeway into bones on the dirt of the courtyard below. So the party have left behind a pile of bones, smashed to pieces by Meryl. I've marked them with tokens on the floor, because I might well come back to those. They do have a skeletal move, reconstruct from miscellaneous bones. Who knows, I may well use that to bring them back later on, but for now they're crushed and lifeless on the floor, although they were kind of already lifeless. Anyway, approaching the doorway, Mylax the thief is at the front. He's whispered to his companions that he'll open and dive through because he's still invisible, and get into a good position to see what's ahead because they've heard the cries of their friend. Trinia, and then want to find what's going on. So I will spin the table now to reveal what's on the other side when Milax opens the door and charges through in his invisible state. So opening the door, Milax bursts straight into a run. He sees in front of him another one of the skeletons, plus two other more fleshy looking undead, but definitely undead by the smell that hits him as he dives through that doorway. Still invisible, he simply runs between them, and of course the three creatures stood there are able to see the rest of the party behind the door, so their focus is on there while Milax makes that run through invisible and heads up looking at the stairs, where he can see up at the top of those stairs there their friend Trinia. She's tied up to a post above some kind of gateway where red smoke and fumes are currently drifting skyward. Some kind of gateway can be assumed. So what do the party do now? This is the question I pose them. What do you do? Moving much more rapidly than the existing skeletons that they met before, the two more fleshy undead charge towards the door when they see it opening to try and block the passageway of any of the other characters, even though, of course, unbeknownst to them, we've already got Milax the Thief behind them in an invisible state with that orange cube beside him again. So let's just move them around. So shoulder to shoulder they were there ready to stop Astrid, but Astrid really had already set her mind on charging through into the room. She wanted to get in there to offer the best defense and a quick attack against the other monsters in that room. So she's going to try and barge through, and she explains to me that to do that she'll simply charge forward and shoulder her way between the two more ghoulish creatures that have arrived there. So timing wise, we can say just as they arrive at the door, she makes that last desperate attempt to charge through. If she says she wants to do that, we'll do that with a Defy Danger roll, and she'll use her strength. So her strength is at +1, and we roll that on a 2d6. So we've got a 6, which would normally be a fail, but with that +1 from her strength, we're lucky we got up to a 7. So the 7 to 9 result on a Defy Danger means that she will be able to make the action, but there'll be some kind of choice to make. So it says here, you stumble, hesitate, or flinch. The GM will offer you a worse outcome, a hard bargain, or an ugly choice. So the outcome that I'm going to offer her is that she can get through, but she'll take a hit from one of the creatures as she passes through. The alternative is she can hang back, seeing that her barge through didn't quite work out. So the ugly choice is, yes, sorry, you'll take a single blow as you pass through the two creatures. So I think she's going to do that. Let's just move her the other side before I make that roll. So she's through, she's into the room, and she's barged past those two ghoulish looking creatures at the doorway. But I'm going to go and make that damage roll against her now. Now these creatures, ghouls, again, in the spirit of the game, I wouldn't necessarily explain to the characters what this creature was, but for this demonstration purpose I'm just going to throw those statistics up on the screen here so we can see exactly what we're doing as a games master. So actually that barge through those two, that shouldering, was the 10th move that the players have made. So I shall now roll that damage. So as you can see, it's a ghoul with a d8 and it's piercing 1, which means it ignores one of Astrid's armor points. So that would typically be 4 damage, but Astrid's armor being 2 reduce it to 2 damage. However, with piercing 1, it's a nasty talon, takes it back up to 3 damage because it ignores one of those armor points that she's got in her scale now. So she gets 3 damage points. So I'm slowly grinding them down. It's taking some time though. And of course, but she's got the successful move she wanted though. She's got her way into the room before they locked it down with a couple of creatures there. Meryl the Barbarian does not want to miss out on the action, and seeing her companion burst through the 2 ghoulish characters at the door, she decides to lay into those herself with her large axe. So she lets out another one of her war cries, screams at the top of her voice that they shall die to the blade of the god of thunder, and charges forward. However, given that she's just told me that she's going to do her war cry again, we've got that "what are you waiting for" action to do first, so let's move over and do that. So the "what are you waiting for" move is a cry out of a challenge and adding con to it. Just move some of these dice that are gathering up here out of the way, and this is our 11th character move. So I can see that's a good roll. We're going to add her con using that "what are you waiting for" cry out to challenge your enemies. On a 10 plus, they treat you as the most obvious. On a 7 to 9, a few, the weakest, most foolhardy among them, fall prey to your taunting. So with that 8 plus the 1, 9, very close to getting a 10, weren't we? But not quite good enough. So we'll say the couple that are near the door are obviously drawn towards her, so they're not going to turn back now against Astrid the fighter. They've got their focus on this axe-wielding, large barbarian maiden before them. And they're going to deal with that, and Astrid's got through essentially into the room and can now deal with whatever else is in there while companions stay at the door. So we just flip back and see that action again. So now her next move, Meryl, will hack and slash at the 2 ghouls at the doorway. Fire up the hack and slash. Move number 12 for our players. Excellent rolling, if I say so myself. You know, you always praise your players, obviously, and that's part of the gameplay, isn't it? Make sure that they get rewarded, and there's a cheer around the table for a successful attack. That's good Games Master practice. Anyway, 10 is a good result because I add my strength, which is 2. Unfortunately, I'm not getting that take +2 damage ongoing against them because I only got a 7 to 9 on the "what you're waiting for" call, but that's still a 10, which means it's a successful hack and slash. And as she sweeps her axe across those 2 there, she will do her damage to both. And so we're back again, D10 damage. No plus to this damage this time. But let's roll and see. Both of the ghouls will take this damage. Now they've got 10 hit points each, so that's really rather good. Ah, what a good roll. So 9 damage is going to attack both of those ghouls, and they have nothing to, well, they have 1 armor, so, and she doesn't have piercing, so they're going to take 8 damage points each. So we'll just take a note of that on a sheet here. So if I can get the right pen, I shall just write Ghoul 1. He's down to his 8 damage points that he's taken, and Ghoul 2 has also taken 8 damage points. Now, Meryl also has that forceful and messy tag, so she's definitely going to use the forceful, and she's going to have gashed that blade across of her axe across both of those creatures, pushing them back with that forceful tag, so they're going to be burst out of the way of the door. So I shall just go and do that. And she's going to follow them through into the room too. And obviously, shortly behind there, we have our wizard character, Tigerloaf, who's also making sure she's not going to be left out of the action and has stepped into the room. So the room is now revealed, and Milanog, the greater dead, has made his presence shown above that top area there. And their companion that they're trying to free, Trinia, is bound and on that post with some kind of jailer character behind her. It looks like he's about to manhandle her down into that portal, whatever it happens to be. And the rest of the party, of course, are still in amongst the minions down below with the fight. So with this scene visible to them, they've got a few more choices. And this is where we'll switch to Mylax in his invisible state, and that's where Mylax will make some choices. The first thing that Mylax wants to do is get up to the top of that stairway. In fact, he wants to go over onto that wooden plank that's joining where Milanog, the greater dead, is stood, and the platform with the gateway above it there. So I think you get to the top of the stairs easily, but I'm going to suggest he needs to do a Defy Danger just to leap past that skeleton, despite the fact he's invisible, onto that platform there. I'm going to make it a +1 for him, a +1 forward it's called, to give him an opportunity to use that +1 on there because he is invisible, but it will take a little leap of faith to get between there, avoiding that skeleton that's stood at the top of the stairway. So I'll move him up and then we'll make the roll and see how it goes. Let's switch over then. Okay, so let's bring up Mylax. And then also make sure I've got the correct move up for Defy Danger. There we go. So Mylax is good at Defy Danger. If it's a dexterous leap like he's doing here, he's got a +2 dex, and we're going to use a dex for the kind of move it's going to do, which is by acting fast and getting out of the way. And again, I gave him that +1 because even if it's a little leap between two planks of wood, he does have to avoid that skeleton that maybe you're just about to march down the stairs. So we'll roll, and we have a 5. Oh, and this is move number 13. Lucky for some, we have a 5 +2 from his dex, which would take it up to 7, and then plus that +1 that I've given him because while he's invisible, it's a little bit easier. So he's definitely in the 7 to 9. So I've got to give him now an opportunity to make a choice. So he's either going to stumble, hesitate, or flinch, or the GM will offer you a worst outcome, hard bargain, or ugly choice. So I'm going to say, as he goes past, that skeleton does step forward and will bump into him and be suddenly aware that there's another presence at the top of the stairs, or he can hang back. So in this instance, I'll give him that opportunity and see what he wants to do. Fearing revealing his location, Mylax decides not to leap all the way up, but to stop at the top of the stairs. So he goes unnoticed, but he doesn't get quite to the destination he wanted to. So I'll just move him back down to show that, yeah, he got a near success. So he got to the top of the stairs, but didn't want to bump into that skeleton and make himself known to the other characters. So if we jump back down into the real action now, where the other players are, we can see that there's still a couple of ghouls surrounding them and a skeleton down at this level. And at this moment, I think Tigerloaf is going to try and strike out. She's going to hit that ghoul beside her with a staff. Now, she's seen before that Meryl the Barbarian came in and gave it a huge gash across its chest, forcing it back away from the doorway. So she's going to just do a normal strike with her staff and hope to land some damage in the process. So there we have Wizard, and she's going to do the classic hack and slash. So this move is open to everybody. So her strength is actually -1, so it's not a great opportunity for her, but let's do that anyway. She needs that 7 to 9 to actually land damage. Well, look at that, she's rolled a 10. Oh, and this is action number 14. Move number 14 for the players. So I've got a 10, -1, takes it down to 9. So, unfortunately, not quite the 10 success we wanted, but she does get a hit on that ghoul. And she just does a d4 damage. And that's 2. So if I remember rightly, these ghouls have 10 points of damage. Let's check it. They do, and this particular one was down to 8 points. So unfortunately, with its armor of 1, that's only going to be 1 point of damage through, and it means that it's now taken 9 wounds, which is not quite enough to kill it, but I shall scribble on that extra damage point onto its sheet, so it's nearly down. But unfortunately, she's going to... so this is where I'm going to make a choice actually for her. There's something I didn't ask, which is you can do 1d6 damage by exposing yourself to the enemy's attack. So this is an extra additional damage. That's only if you get the 10 result. Okay, yeah, I'd forgotten about that. She didn't get the 10 plus, so she can't do that. On a 7 to 9, she deals her damage, and the enemy deals her damage back. So let's see. It's a d8 coming in on Tigerloaf the Wizard. Oh dear, so it's a 7. And it's got piercing 1. Tigerloaf doesn't have any armor anyway, and she has 19 hits. So if I find her sheet, she's taken all 7 damage points there. So maybe not quite a wise move for Tigerloaf the Wizard, but seeing as she thought it was an opportunity to take, she saw that that ghoul was pretty much crippled already. Unfortunately, it didn't pan out the way she'd hoped. So back over in the action, our shield maiden, Astrid, the fighter, is stuck in between there with her shield held high. Behind her, she's got a ghoul that's currently was engaged with Tigerloaf just a moment ago, and a skeleton before her. So she describes a move where she twists around, strikes the blade against the back of the ghoul, and then returns before her and brings her shield up into the chin of that skeleton to try and hit them both at once. So we'll flip over and see how that happens. Well, let's bring up the details of Astrid, the fighter, and then hack and slash again. So it's just a basic 2d6, and we'll move that on to move 15 for the players. And that is a nice clean roll. So she's got a 10, and that's a definite hit. So that's a success because she'd add a +1 to that from her strength, taking her up to 11. So she can now do her damage to both of those. So you roll once and both will take the damage, both the ghoul and the skeleton. That is a fantastic strike. So she's also got piercing +2 on her sword, Akrin's Bane, which means that it ignores that armor on the ghoul anyway. And of course this ghoul had already taken 9 hits already. It had 1 left. So this is major overkill, and the blade sinks into the back of the ghoul. It crashes down onto the floor. And also if we fire up the stats for a skeleton, we can see they only have 7 hit points and 1 armor. Again, that piercing goes through. But as Astrid explained, she was using a shield to knock the chin off that skeleton, and she knocks its skull completely clean off the top of its head. So it just stumbles randomly about, falls to its knees and collapses. So that was a fantastic move from Astrid. She's wiped out 2 monsters beside her. And of course, the Barbarian, Merrill, doesn't want to be left out and wants to try and finish this ghoul off as well. Before Merrill, the sturdy Barbarian, can act, Minanog, the greater dead, speaks.
Qual, my servant, toss the female into the pit now. I wish to obtain my new flesh and body. Sacrifice her now, and don't hesitate.
Milax thinks fast. He wants to have a proper look. What's happening here? What if I can get in close to see and unbind her before she's tossed in? He's going to try and weave through past Qual and see if he can free Trinia and take a close look at things while he's doing that. In the meantime, also, Meryl down below has decided she's going to give up the fight with that ghoul. So we'll start with Milax the Thief. He's still invisible at the top of the stairs, and he's going to weave his way through the skeleton and Qual the jailer beside the gate to see if he can get to the bindings of Trinia.
Remember, don't shoot food.
So let's have a look then. So let's have a look what he shall do with his Defy Danger. He's going to add his dex to it. We have a 5, it takes it up to 7. Okay, so I've got to give him a hard choice. This is within the 7 to 9 partial success bracket. So he's going to stumble, hesitate or flinch, and I need to provide a worse outcome, a hard bargain or an ugly choice. So here's the ugly choice. He jumps through, gets past the skeleton and behind Qual, the jailer, but in doing so stumbles and reveals himself. By striking into the back of Qual, he will become visible in the process, but he will find himself stood behind Qual and near the bindings of Trinia as she's stuck up against that post. So that's his choice, or hang back. So I think he's going to decide to dive on through. So picking him up, I shall move him. I shall remove the orange cube signifying his invisibility that has been part of the game so far. And of course, just to remind myself, that was the 16th move we've made for the players. And of course, if you've just skipped forward and you're trying to work out why I'm recording all the moves, it's just for my own reference really, to be able to see, generally speaking, how many moves those characters are making. Of course, I'm doing this solo play, so it's somewhat tricky to track things, so any reference I've got helps in this process. Tigerloaf can sense that her magical infinity has faded. Milax is no longer protected. However, she also spots that Meryl is about to make a move and charge up their stairs, and she thinks, I'm going to get in there first. So with some negotiation amongst the party, she says, let me run up there first. I want to spot what's going on and see in detail my friend Trinia. Perhaps I can bargain with them and stop this before there's any more bloodshed. So she chases out.
I've not seen such bravery.
And up the stairs. However, she's managed to avoid any kind of impact from combat there, because the existing ghoul was left behind, still engaged by Meryl, and the skeletons on the top have just seen Milax reveal himself behind the post there. So she steps up to the top and she wants to make a check to see if she can see something going on up here. Takes a close inspection as she looks around, tries to check out the bindings of her friend Trinia while staring over at Milanog to work him out and size him up. So here we have our Discern Realities roll. Oh, we're up to 17 moves now, and that's a fantastic roll, a 10. So she can ask me 3 questions now.
Valkyrie, your
So the
life
questions
force
she
is
asks
running
me
out.
are, what is about to happen? And of course, from what she can see, it looks like the jailer, Qual, is about to unbind Trinian. He's leaning over with one hand on her back to push her into that portal to wherever it goes. So that's her first question. Who's really in control here is her next question. So my response to that as the games master is to say, unusually when she stared over at Trinian, it looked like her bindings on her wrists were very, very loose. They didn't look completely tight. And she notices her hands are almost freeing themselves as the guard Qual leans over to push her in to the gateway and down into the portal. And her last question is, what here is not what it appears to be? And that supports that as well, because when her friend Trinia turns to see her old childhood friend and their eyes meet across the skeletal horde between them, she can sense something's not right. Trinian's face looks a little bit gaunt. She looks angry. She doesn't look like a captive. So at this cliffhanger stage where Tigerloaf, the wizard, is atop the stairs and staring over at her friend Trinia, who looks to be just about ready to be pushed by Qual, that jailer there, into the portal, she discovers that something is not right. This isn't quite as it seems, and that's where I'm going to end the battle here.
Well done.
And just say again, thanks to Sage Latura and Adam Coble for writing these excellent set of rules. And just to remind viewers that I'm typically not a solo player. I've just done this layout and this plan of action so that I can demonstrate some of the rules in DungeonWorld. You can see everything from how combat works to sneaking about, a little bit of magic, and some of the other style of play in terms of what happens when you roll that 0 to 6 on your move dice. And hopefully that's been enough of an overview for people to get a taster for DungeonWorld. And if you want to see more of this, please comment, like, subscribe, all those usual exciting things to do with YouTube, because I'd really appreciate feedback. And if you've seen some mistakes in here, or you thought, well, maybe you could have done it slightly differently, I'd appreciate any comments on there. It's remarkable, actually. It's been quite a challenge to get this created, in the sense that as a solo games master, which I'm not familiar with, it's quite hard to bounce ideas off my own brain, so to speak. And it would have been handy to have at least one other player to maybe control all of the players to and the party moves, so that I could respond to them. So, please bear with me if I've made a few mistakes, because it is a challenge to get all those things right, whilst also creating this video and switching between the playing roles and other activity. But yes, I mean, as a summary, Tigerloaf has taken 7 hits. We've had a couple of other damage incoming on Astrid as a fighter. It's had 3 hits. And, I think we got hit on did we get hit on the Barbarian as well, Meryl? Yeah, Meryl's had 2 hit points damage. So it's been, it's been a little bit rough for them, but they've done really well, I think. I haven't had too many failed rolls. And I think, exciting key moments when Meryl barged through that doorway and took out 2 ghouls. Well, nearly took them out, but it was an exciting move all the same. So thanks again for listening in. Please comment, tell me where I went wrong. And also just remember that this wasn't about the character creation process, which is a little bit more complicated than I've portrayed, because there's bonds and other features and interesting things to create when you actually create your characters in DungeonWorld. And also, this hasn't been really about the roleplay side of things, because that's very hard to do as a solo player. I need people to bounce narrative and fiction backwards and forwards between as players. So this has really just been about the action in play, rather than the roleplay and the story making and the narrative. But hopefully I've given you enough of a taster, and thanks for listening. I shall stop now. Goodbye.